Kia ora everyone, and welcome to HR Chats with Terada. I'm Terada, and we are chatting with a range of New Zealand's leading lights in HR, but a range of interesting trends and ideas from the world of human resources. And if there are any people, or indeed any ideas that you would like discussed, or to have discussions with, then by all means we will let you know at the end how to do that. Today, we are talking with Jo Martell. She is the GM of Human Resources for Group Functions at Fonterra. An HR career spanning over 25 years in New Zealand and the UK. She's led both business partnering and specialist portfolios with global organisations. And her recent experiences include leadership positions within Fonterra, Air New Zealand, Fletcher Distribution, as well as Martell Holdings as a company director. While at Fonterra, Jo's been particularly instrumental in helping people across the cooperative build their careers through initiatives such as Women at Work, the Millennial Council, and the Finance Talent Forum. And she's recently been appointed as a board director of HRNZ. Hello, Jo.
G'day, how are you?
Is it funny sometimes hearing your career summed up, when someone reads your bio out at something and you think, gosh, yes, all of those things.
Yes, is that really me?
Is it really you?
Oh, I don't know. It's a very small part of me. I guess it's the same with all of us. What you see of us at work is a very small part of us.
Isn't it?
One of the things I love being back in New Zealand is you get more of the full Jo, as opposed to being offshore when you get Jo the employee, but you come back home and you become Jo the daughter, Jo the mum, Jo the sister, Jo the auntie, and so it's a bit of me.
Do you think over that sort of COVID period where that has happened more even with people within the workplace, suddenly when they are working from home, who that person is has extended amongst their sort of work colleagues?
Oh, I think that's one of the beautiful thing of COVID is that all of a sudden we've become humans again. And funnily enough, by being separated physically, we've become closer connected. I think we know more about our colleagues' families, about what's important to them. You can't beat going into a Zoom call and seeing a child sitting on a knee for understanding the context in which somebody lives. It's just family life. It's been beautiful.
It really has, actually. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And then, in a sort of a roundabout way, brings us to what we're going to talk about today, which is social enterprise, of that role, I suppose, of businesses extending themselves beyond core business. So if someone said to you, here I am at dinner, we're having a conversation over a lovely glass of wine and some lamb and some yams, and we started talking about social enterprise, and I said, I don't really know what you mean by that. What would you say?
Oh, well, I'm not sure either, actually. To be perfectly honest, I'm not an expert, but what I am is insanely curious about it. And some of my curiosity came back from coming back to New Zealand some years ago now from the UK, but a lot of it is through reading, and in particular, beautiful Deloitte's Human Capital Report 2019 that really talks about the concept of a social enterprise. And what it's really starting to explore is beyond profit. So what is there beyond profit? And so many organisations are starting to measure triple bottom line, so it kind of makes sense. Yeah, I get that. So beyond profit, we mean environment. Are we taking care of our environment? Beyond profit in terms of end-to-end supply chain. So to what extent do we really care about our suppliers? To what extent do we care about our customers? If we're customer-facing organisations, how much do we really know about our customers and what they want? But then that beautiful, beautiful thing that HR people are so absolutely passionate about is our people. So, do we really care about our people, and have we got these things in balance? And I guess those are the kind of conversations we start to have when we talk about our organisations as social enterprises. So that's what I get excited about.
So from an HR perspective, what does that mean in practice? What have you seen or implemented in this kind of area?
Yeah, so I think what we have seen inadvertently through COVID is the rise of the human being. So, the dialing down on the employee and the dialing up on everybody's a human being. And yet we haven't been able to escape from that during COVID. I can't come to work, I'm vulnerable, or I've got an elderly parent to take care of, or if I've got kids, or how do I do my best work from working from home? And we've actually, instead of kind of wrapping work around home around work, we've wrapped work around home. And so it's really caused the conversation to shift from business to people, and it's almost causing the conversation to shift around I want to drive profits. How do people allow me to do that? To actually, we really care about our people. And if we invest in our people, they'll drive profits. So it's been that beautiful transition in focus where we've shifted that attention to care. That's what
I'm
I'm
curious,
starting to see emerge.
actually. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is curious. And, we've been talking about this a bit, and I've suddenly, and it's more than simply pay and conditions. When we're thinking about this, where do some of the things that are implemented through this manifest in negotiations? I've only just thought of that now.
Ah.
Well, how do you put a tangible kind of thing where you go, yes, well, this is, because when people think of a pay negotiation, this is the rate and these are the hours and this is what it is, and we'll sign a contract. Have you
Ah.
seen a change in the way that this has
Oh.
manifested itself through negotiations with employees, with unions, with employers?
Yeah. Is it negotiations? Good point. Or is it conversation? So, we talk about that negotiation and you can apply for a job and I offer you a job and you say either yes or no. And that brings in that whole thing of diversity and inclusion. When I receive that offer, how do I look at that? Is that a negotiation or is it an offer? So for me, then it comes back to the conversation. So I can either, as an employer, I can say to you, well, here's a job and here's the hours we want you to work and here's our office and here's our technology, come and fill your boots and we'll measure your performance, which is all cool. Or I can say to you, hey, Joe, really interesting talking to you during your interview. Learned a lot more about you and your capabilities and your skills. And there's this kind of job I'm thinking about. How does it shape up for you? And what would make the difference between you being an amazing performer and hugely successful in this job and doing a good job? So what is that difference between good and great? And what do you need? So it shifts that whole conversation around from actually this is what I want to what do you need, and how do we start engaging in those two-way beautiful conversations with people that perhaps we haven't paid enough attention to in the past. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, look, I think it is. Language is really important. That's what I think. And so that it's nice to point out: is it a negotiation or a conversation?
Yeah.
And so I suppose it is that thing of you want to hire someone to fulfill a certain role, but if they are coming into your organization, it's not only what you can do for them, but what above and beyond their role can they do for you, I suppose. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and that broader connection. So, I might come and want to join an organisation because I believe in the cause of the organisation. They're there for a good thing, but I might have other things I want to do as well. You talked about who's Joe Martell, who's Terada. Well, who I am at work may be one aspect of me, but what happens if I'm interested in contributing to society or my community in a different way? How do we start to tie those things together? So how by being a good employee, I can also be a good contributor to society in a way that makes sense for me. So how
So
do I
how then?
combine those
Yeah,
things?
yeah. And so how then does an employer encourage or facilitate that? What is the role of an employer in this, where they say, well, look, if you want to be a good citizen, that's all well and good. You've got
Mm-hmm.
X number of hours outside of our time for you to do that. What's the kind of thing that a
Yeah.
company needs to start thinking about if they want to, I guess, in some ways, facilitate and to help build better people and better communities?
Yeah, well, I guess the first ingredient is listening. So if we were talking about a job, I'd really want to find out what was important to you. And there's the scope of the job. There's some negotiables with any job. We've got a lot of employees who work shift work. We've got employees who it makes sense to have a full-time job. It makes sense to have fixed working patterns. But then there's this whole concept of flexibility. And how flexible are we willing to be as organisations to say, well, actually, if we really sat back and thought about it, what are we trying to measure when somebody comes into the organisation? What are the outcomes we want them to deliver? What are the must-haves in place there? And have we got the metrics right around those? Or in this particular job, is this the outcome that's really important? And does it matter whether this person's in an office, or does it matter that they may choose to work certain hours during the day and they almost also may want to work in the evening? And they may want to carve their day up differently to allow them to give some other things in their life the time that suits that, as long as they're delivering the outcome that we need as an organisation. Is that okay? So how do we shift that conversation and how do we get our heads around that? Because one of the things that I think we're all really conscious in today is our heads are full. I don't know about you, I've had one of those weeks this week where my head's full and, I get a little drop of the extra thing on the top of my head and it's just explode and I leak all over the place. Oh, it's too much, I can't cope. So how do we create space for people to think about these things and create an environment where it's okay to explore them and to talk about them and to be open-minded about new concepts? And I don't have the answer to that. As I said, my head's exploding this week, but it's a really exciting conversation to start exploring with different people.
Yeah, it is. How would you explore it, or how have you explored it at the top level? I guess at the executive level, when they're looking at, there's a troubled times. That you've got a lot of stakeholders. Fonterra, you've got your farmer shareholders, you've got your overseas market, you've got all of these. You've got environmental concerns, and you come in from HR and think, I think we should encourage, whatever it may be. How do you begin to address? They're not the nice to haves because they're essential in many ways in a current sort of employment situation. What have you done to it? What's your opening line, your opening gambit?
Oh, hey, well, there's lots of different ways you can approach it. One of my favorites at night is I'm really curious, really curious about this aspect, or what do you think, or how are you finding something? So for me, it's asking questions to try and get that door opened. And I think one of the things that we're struggling with and tend to struggle with as HR practitioners is actually getting the door open in the conversation. Just about, if we think about flexibility, we talk about flexibility a lot, and I'm not sure whether it's who created the word, and it's a word that's got different definitions. So if I want to talk about flexibility, I can't go and talk about flexibility in some parts of our business because they think I'm talking about parental leave. And so the immediate reaction is, oh, we're not going to increase parental leave, or parental leave's fine. But if I talk about it in terms of how somebody's found working under COVID and what they've done that they haven't had a chance to do through COVID, or if I talk about it from a perspective we're finding it hard to fill a certain kind of jobs, if we took a different approach to how we organise these jobs or create these jobs, maybe there's an opportunity to do things differently to make these jobs more attractive to a broader group of employees than in the past. So, for example, for some of our office jobs, if we didn't mention location, if we said actually what we're going to do is continue to invest in technology so somebody can do their job from anywhere, anytime, any place, would that increase the number of people that we could get to apply for these particular very specialist roles? And would it increase diversity, for example, if we simply took place of work off our job descriptions? I don't know.
And that's an
interesting concept.
It is an interesting concept, and I see some of the big tech companies, I think it was Facebook the other day, because they'd had, people had gone home into quarantine and worked from home there, and they said, look, we'd really love to encourage this, and once you've decided if this is for you and it suits, then let us know where your place of work is, and we will rediscuss your remuneration. Essentially saying, if you want to go and live somewhere cheap, we'll pay you less. So there's a lot of strange
I know.
ramifications around that. No, I mean, that just seems inherently unfair. What I mean?
It's a cool conversation to have.
Isn't it a great conversation to have?
Yeah,
How much
why would you do that?
Why would you do that? The other really good one I saw was devolving the kind of rostering down to the people who need to be rostered on. There was a business that required someone always to be on call at some point. And so what they did was they said, this is fine, but this team of 8 or whatever it was, you need to discuss this amongst yourselves. And so they got everyone to share. And so that people knew that Sarah couldn't do a Thursday because on Thursday she would always go and see her mum who was in dementia care, or someone else had to do their kid played football on a Saturday. So that is why they couldn't do a Saturday. So in terms of the flexibility was there, but they allowed that flexibility to be discussed at that level.
Yeah. And I think we're probably taking baby steps. I think that would, and rightly so, that would completely blow the minds of some organisations where you have very regimented roster patterns, where you've got very set timelines for production, where you've got very stringent training requirements around health and safety and food technology. So we're taking baby steps, but I love the concept of empowering people. It's part of our purpose here in Fonterra. And so what do we actually mean by empowering people? How far are we prepared to take that? And what's the first step we're going to take?
What is the first step you're going to take? I guess it depends on what part of the business you're in. You can't
It
really work from home
does.
remotely if you're driving a tanker, for example.
No, it's just not going to work, is it?
Well,
No, but
although,
imagine it
technology
might.
in the future.
What happens if I've always wanted to be a tanker driver, but my job has required me to be based in Auckland City? What happens then if my job doesn't require me to be based in an office in Auckland City and I can base myself out of Ashburton? And what happens if I could say, well, this part of my job I can do, love to keep on doing, but with the other rest of my time, I want to become a tanker driver. Wouldn't that be
Yeah,
cool?
wouldn't that be
I've
cool?
always wanted to drive bulldozers. Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be cool. And of course, that's one of those industries that we're looking at huge changes in the next, 5 or 10 years
Yeah,
around driverless technology and all kinds of things. I think probably tanker drivers will be
yeah,
fine because just, it's not like America where they're putting a truck on a freeway and it drives across the state. There's multiple sort of drivers. Here's my question.
yeah.
What responsibility do organizations, large or small, have for actually creating sustainable communities and economies? All of these things, allowing people to go and do things, involving themselves in various projects that benefit people. What is the responsibility these days of a big organization in that kind of sphere?
Hey, that's a beautiful question. And that's one thing I love about being back home in New Zealand. The two are becoming more and more linked, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
So when another lesson from COVID, when we look at what COVID has taught us, is COVID has taught us the value of partnerships. COVID has taught us that we can't have a government operating in this area and employees operating in a different area. The most beautiful thing about COVID is where you see that combination of governments and employers working together with communities, with employees, and we're all in this together. And that's just been the most amazing experience. So how do we learn from that, and how do we continue those beautiful partnerships and relationships to say that there's that mutual obligation? And I don't think you can separate them. I don't think that's possible. But I think also the challenges that we've got in the world today are just immense, and they're too big for any one party to tackle on their own. We look at the challenges that we've got in mental health in New Zealand and all around the world. That's a huge challenge that we've got that's becoming quite pervasive in our society and in our workplaces and in our communities. So what are we going to do about that, and how do we collaborate to find some solutions that no one party can do on their own? How do we get our heads around that? How do we support our communities in New Zealand? We've seen in COVID that there's more ability to work flexibly. Does that mean that there's ability to have reduced office presence in cities like Auckland? And does that mean that people can work more in our local community? Does that mean that they can give more time or more economy, improve the economy in our local communities? Does it mean in doing so that we reduce the impact on the environment in our big cities? Does it mean that we don't have to invest so much money in roading in our cities? Does it change our investment footprint nationally?
Well, it does. The
So,
decision of
great
where to build,
conversation.
of where to base offices changes everything for people. Do people have to pay
Yeah,
Auckland house prices and sit in traffic for all that period of time when
yeah,
essentially they could be doing a similar job from Hamilton or Ashburton or Invercargill?
yeah. And I think too, the exciting thing about that is when you come back to look at that end-to-end value chain that organisations are looking at being social enterprises. If I want to connect more with my customers, for example, why don't I co-locate with my customers? I was reading an article this morning from the Netherlands, and it said that Netherlands got 14% of employees in the Netherlands as a total work remotely. So you think, wow, that's quite a big difference and for that country. And then you talk about how they do it. So some of the things they're looking at is they're repurposing libraries to become communal working spaces. I don't know about you. How cool is that? Go into a library and find nice and quiet, get my work done, but I also get to collaborate. I think about Fonterra and we talk about connecting with our farmers, incredibly important that we connect with our farmers. Well, how can we create spaces where we can collaborate together and work together potentially? And that
And that's
opens up a whole new dimension.
Yeah, particularly when the resources are there, why not have almost going back? Is it almost going back to this concept of branch offices? Everything for a while was retrenched back into a kind of a central bunker, and now we're
Yeah.
almost going, well, let's send people back out. And it will be interesting to see in the future, when we talk about that kind of flexibility of location, and people probably instinctively think, oh, I don't really want to work from home, but the sort of continuing upswell of hubs, of purpose-built locations where Fonterra could go, look, we maintain 10 desks in this building in Ashburton, and we maintain, 5 desks down there in Invercargill, for our people to come in and
Mm.
out of, as may be, because then that we don't have to have them here, and actually they're out and about doing what it is they need to do.
Yeah, and at the same time, when you look at the environmental challenges we've got ahead of us and some of those metrics that we're trying to deliver, it serves two purposes, which is a beautiful thing in my mind. As soon as, the more dots you can join, the better, really.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it may well do one of those other sort of bugbears of HRs is how do you increase, the diversity of people and skills to get, all of that kind of large concept of what diversity actually means. It's not simply gender or ethnicity, sexuality. It's background, it's intellectual backgrounds. It's all of that, isn't it?
Hey, yeah, and that's what's really exciting about the conversation that we're starting. For so long, diversity and inclusion, parts of diversity and inclusion, have to be careful here not to broad brush, but parts of the diversity and inclusion about how can we change our minority population to fit in with the majority? And, being a woman in the workplace, how you become more masculine to fit in? And especially for our working parents, how do I conform to this, 12-hour day environment, on top of that getting to and from the office location? How do we kind of juggle with that, with the need for diversity and inclusion? Because it just doesn't work, and it doesn't matter. It's irrespective of gender or anything. It just doesn't work in terms of driving a diverse culture and enabling diversity. So how do
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
do away with some of the old concepts around our workplace and use this opportunity to say, well, actually, if we design more of our workplaces around individual needs, then that automatically will create the opportunity for diversity. It'll automatically mean that I can be more of myself and have that balance between home and work, and bring my best self to work rather than have to conform to meet the working hours or the typical profile around promotions. Or it also allows us, sorry, I'm getting really excited here, as you can see, it
I can
allows
see
us to
actually, and
rethink how we design jobs. Yeah. Sorry, mate, I'll sit back, I'll
no,
breathe.
no, is it? No, 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 no. This is great. I was actually thinking the last thing anyone needs in the workplace is more of me being me. Hey, this is an interesting thing. How do you
Hmm.
redesign jobs? What does that mean in
Well,
practice?
yeah, it's a really good question. So when we look at, especially if we look at more senior roles, and Fonterra is not alone in that it has a gender imbalance in the senior roles. And a lot of females say, actually, I don't want that big job because I can't work 24/7. I can't be in the office at this time. I can't stay in the office at this time. If there's something that needs me, that's important to me as a parent, I need to be at home for that. I need to drop everything. It's just not, I can't operate like that and be successful as a human being. Um, so it's really sad that we see um, the number of applicants for those senior roles reduce significantly because of the way that we've designed roles. So instead of saying, here's a job, apply for it, why don't we say, well, actually, these are the outcomes that we want to deliver. You tell me, if these are the outcomes that we need to deliver in this portfolio, how would you deliver those? How would it work for you? And how do we, again, shift that conversation and rethink some of the working practices that have suited the majority pretty well for a long time, but actually are no
Or the
longer
majority who have fulfilled
completely
those
fit for
positions.
purpose.
This
Yeah.
comes down as well to this sort of concurrent change in the nature of leadership. What does it mean to be a
Yeah.
leader? How do
Mm.
leaders communicate and what people want in leaders? And I'm sure that you've been following the global discussions around leadership at the highest levels at the moment, the comparisons between Jacinda Ardern, the Trumps, Angela
Mm,
Merkel's, your Boris Johnsons, and how
yeah.
they have coalesced in them leading countries through pandemics, and how that's filtered down into other leadership roles. And we've seen,
Mm,
discussions around the vulnerability of leaders, the imperfect leader, even the very notion of what a leader is.
mm, yeah. Hey, well, guess what? Our leaders are human beings. You know,
And people need to see
go
that, and they've
figure.
seen it. And when,
They have
and
seen
we're
it.
yeah, and no longer does a sort of a dictate come down on high from a PDF emailed out to everyone in a weekly newsletter. Now people are very much expecting people in those leadership roles to speak to them directly through a Facebook Live, through group chat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a humanness there as well. We were talking earlier on about that sense of the reveal of the human side of people.
Yeah. So leaders are human beings, and um, I don't envy anybody in a leadership role today, because they are changing the shape of leadership role, and the expectations we have on leaders these days are so unreasonable. We're expecting them to be everything and anything. Um, and so when we see the kind of challenges that our leaders are confronting today, it's no longer viable to be, in my mind, to be a hero leader, because you can't possibly be all things to all people. And you look at some of the most amazing leaders around the world, it's because they're a team player. It's because they recognise the areas that they're strong in, and they recognise areas where they need their team members and their colleagues to step up and be part of that leadership journey with them. So for me, leadership's a real team sport, and it's not just a team sport with my colleagues, it's a team sport with my team members. So, what are the strengths that I've got, and what are the strengths that my team have got, and how do we actually put all the best of that together to be the best possible team? And I think that's where we see leadership going in the future. It's being that team player, and
Because it
bringing
is
your best self to your particular role in that team.
yeah, I mean this concept of the future of work, and it is this all encompassing thing. You've been in this business for a long time. What's probably
Long
the
time.
most a long time? We've all been in it a long time, but it creeps up on you, doesn't it? And all of a sudden you think, actually, someone's reading out your
Yeah.
bio, and you think, oh my goodness, I've been in this a long time. From the if you think back over the big changes that you've seen over all those years, what right up until now, it may not even be a change that we've seen recently. What's the biggest and singly the most important change do you think that you've seen in your many years involved in HR?
Oh, that's a big question. It's been a long
Yes, and I've
time
saved
to
it till the end.
I think one of the surprises is, you complete your qualifications, and you know everything, don't you? And you look at your parents, and they know everything, and you go through life expecting that at some stage in your life you will know everything. And I think you do go a bit through a sweet spot in life where you think, yeah, I've got it, and then you suddenly realise, oh no, I haven't. I don't know a damn thing. Um, and so what you realise is actually life is absolutely a lifelong learning journey. And if we give up on our curiosity, if we give up on that passion for seeing what's over the next hill, or learning what this looks like, or testing what something looks like from somebody else's perspective, it's a bit sad, isn't it? So I think
Yes,
that's
actually, it's
what's
yeah. It's
it's a
nicely summed up
surprise, isn't
actually
it?
in a song in Frozen. It might be Frozen 2 from the Little Snowman who said, here's that wonderful song. This will all make sense when I'm older, but it never does. It never does.
Never does. Yeah, I
Biggest
also think there's a
challenge.
beautiful oh, sorry,
No,
biggest
go on.
challenge.
Don't leave. Yeah, no. Good. You were going to say you think there's a beautiful.
Oh, a beautiful quote come across recently, from Michael Henderson, who's a cultural anthropologist. Who knew they existed? Beautiful man. Great conversations in the last week. He said, "The world is not a problem; it's a perspective."
That is
So
beautiful.
that perspective, in terms of that learning perspective, is a beautiful thing.
It is a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. What's the biggest difficulty you see us facing in the HR, employment, work, social spheres in the next little while?
Yeah.
Something that keeps you awake at night.
Space. Lots of things keep me awake at night. Space. It's the space to space and time to sit back and reflect. I think this general busyness in the world, and not just at work, outside of world, you've got young children who are growing up. We've got technology coming at us and changing the way we have these conversations. My car's now a computer. So everything's happening so quickly. COVID came across us. We don't have time to prepare, and we're all up to our eyeballs, and our heads are just full, totally full. So how do we create pace and space? Sorry, not pace. How do we slow down the pace? Create space to sit back and think, and have the conversations that help us in our thinking to learn, and to have time to assimilate thinking and then to apply it before we just have to constantly react.
Yeah.
And how do we
probably,
recreate that space for our leaders?
Yeah. And probably that recognition of the privilege that for a lot of people, they just don't have that space, because it's a daily grind just to get through, work and to the kids and the bills and all of that. So that ability to allow others to have that space as well, I suppose, is it a far more complicated world, HR, now than what it was when you started? You probably wouldn't have been thinking in your classes or your courses or whatnot around, well-being and, total remote flexibility and redefining jobs rather than redefining people.
No, when I first started HR, we were the personnel department. We didn't have computers. And our biggest challenges, when I first entered personnel, it was to learn the name of every single employee in my engineering company, and to know who their spouse was and how many children they had and what ages their children were. And so it's kind of not quite come full circle, but we talk about the human experience and a human approach. In those days, it was very human approach. A lot more complicated now. The field has just grown in terms of complexity, but it's coming back to the human being still.
That core lesson, the word human is in the job description, because that's essentially what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
If there was one thing, one great thing where you said, you know what, if I had to stop now and that's it, I'm going to retire to the beach and just satiate my curiosity by reading for the rest of time. If you could look back at any one change or any one thing that you've helped to implement that you went, that was a great thing, what would it be?
I'm not convinced it's the big things, and I don't think, I'm not done. I'm not ready.
But you
I'm
are
not
right.
ready with my legacy.
You are right.
I'm not ready.
Not yet. No. But you are right.
But
often people do look for those big things, don't they? Those groundbreaking things. But actually, a big thing can just be a succession of small things, little things.
The little things. When somebody comes and says to me, that was such a cool conversation we had, it caused me to go away and think, and this is what I've done with this thinking. I've changed my job, or I've improved this in my life, or I don't know, I'm very old-fashioned. I do knitting. I go home in the evening and when I've knit. And so babies in Fonterra, when I know there's a baby coming, they get something knitted. One of the most beautiful things I get in life is a card with a baby photo on saying, thank you for this gift you've given my baby. So summarising it, the gifts of love that we can give people in different forms, whether it's gift of love in terms of time, gift of love in terms of support, gift of love in terms of something tangible like a piece of knitting. I think that's our legacy as human beings, is maybe the small gifts of love rather than the big things.
Nice summation in many ways around the kind of current state of human resources, that actually these little things are important to people. They make a difference. And the great thing about a knitting thing as well is there's a long legacy there. It goes to that child. We've all been given those gifts, and then when someone's given you something personal like that, you really think about who you then gift that onto when your child's grown out of it, or do you keep it and then you send a photo of the next child, and then that comes back to you and you send that on. So, it's a little bit like, making better people. You can help someone in your workplace with whatever systems you've got, and then they'll go out and they'll help any number of people, and that little chain trickles down.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jo. What a great conversation. Haven't even touched my lamb.
Have
you touched the lamb?
Oh, no.
Haven't drunk my metaphorical wine. And that is exactly the point of these HR chats. We were talking to
Yeah.
Joe Martell, GM Human Resources at Fonterra, an enormous company, but as you can hear, still very much focused on the importance of individuals. A part of the HR Chats with me, Terada, where we're talking to some of the leading lights in HR around all of these many and varied trends and topics in human resources. And as I say, if there is someone that you wish to hear from or something that you would like us to address, there is a contact. You can click on the contact on the podcast page on the HRNZ website, where you're no doubt listening to this, and let us know. So thank you, Joe. We'll speak with others in the future.
Hey, thanks so much, Trader. Really enjoyed the conversation.